Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome back to Ramadan of the Sahaba, Yo of Mustafa. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. We'll be going on a special journey with one of my favorite Sahabas. He's a companion of the beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that should be very close to every Muslim's heart, not just mine. His name, Zaid Ibn Thabit radiyallahu anhu, and he was a very knowledgeable person. Every time we pick up the Quraan, we need to remember his efforts into bringing it all together. But more on that later. Our story begins in Medina in Saudi Arabia, where little Zaid was born. May Allah be pleased with him. His father passed away early in his life, so he was raised an orphan. It was just him and his mum. He was around your age, 11 years old, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam made the hijrah. And remember, the hijrah was the migration of the Muslims from Mecca to Medina, where Zayd was living at the time. It was around this time where Zayd became a Muslim and converted to Islam. He was part of the Muslims in Medina that took the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his followers into their homes. So, does that make Zayd an Al-Ansar or Muhajirin? That's right. When Zaid Ibn Thabit al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu converted to Islam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a dua of goodness for him. Wow, how amazing would that be? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself making a dua. We'll definitely see the effect of that all throughout his story. 2 years after becoming a Muslim, the Battle of Badr took place. Do you guys remember what year after the Hijrah that was? Well, it's not a hard one, I just said it. 2 years. Zayd really wanted to go to battle, but he couldn't because he was so young. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very strict about this. Zayd was really sad and started to cry. Even his mum was sad. After that, when the Battle of Uhud took place, Zayd wanted to go again. Do you remember what year after the Battle of Badr Uhud took place? That's right, 1 year after the Battle of Badr. So Zayd, now being a little bigger, and his friends went up to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and begged him to go. One of his friends showed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam a lance, and he was showing him how much of a skilled spearman he was. The Prophet smiled and allowed them to go, and in fact, Zayd was the youngest person who was allowed to go into the Battle of Uhud. Now, Zayd really wanted to serve Islam, and so his mother told him to learn how to read and recite the Qur'an. His mum thought Zayd was really good at reading the Qur'an, and so presented Zayd to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he told him that he could read and write very well, and that he was magnificent in reciting the Qur'an. So, when Zayd Ibn Thabit recited verses of the Qur'an, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was impressed. So what do you think the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did next? Well, he gave Zayd a task. Because he was so keen to serve Islam and was able to read and write, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam then asked him to learn the Hebrew language, as the Muslims needed someone trustworthy to protect them through language. How long would it have taken you to learn the complete language? Did I hear you say 2 weeks? No? Too little? Well, guess what? That's exactly what Zayd Ibn Thabit radiyallahu anhu did. He came back 2 weeks later, having perfected Hebrew. He was completely fluent in Hebrew in just a matter of 2 weeks. But the surprise doesn't stop there. Then the Prophet, peace be upon him, asked Zayd to learn Syriac. Not Syrian, by the way, Syriac. It's an old language and only a very few people nowadays speak that language. Actually, where I'm from, in northern Iraq, a few people there still speak that language. But anyway, Zaid Ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu learned the Syriac language again in a short span of just 17 days, just over 2 weeks. This guy is so clever. Now, let's take a pause in our story here and think about all this. What we've just learned here is very important. Learning languages is an important task, and in fact it is from the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we can see with Zaid. Because languages helps us connect with people from all sorts of backgrounds, and it can also protect us when we know what other people around us are saying. So I think learning languages in high school and intermediate is a very rewarding subject, especially if it's done for the right reasons. Next time you're studying a language at school or home, think about Zaid's accomplishments. And it's a no-brainer, of course, but the best language is the language of the Quraan, Arabic. Okay, so let's continue on with our story of Zaid. There was something else that Zaid was really good at school, and that was arithmetic, what we call numbers and maths. So who here is good with their fractions or adding and taking away? Well, that's exactly what Zaid was really good at when he was in school, like you guys. This would set Zaid up later in his life when he became the master of the laws of inheritance. But we'll talk about that later. So you can see here that Zaid excelled in reading and writing as a young child, and on top of that he was a great reciter of the Quraan. He was able to learn Hebrew and Syriac, and on top of all of that he excelled in mathematics at school. Now, there's a lesson here for all of us. As Muslims, we have to strive to be the best of the best in all areas. I think good effort in school isn't really good enough. We have to really push ourselves to be the absolute best we can be, so that one day we can use this knowledge we've learnt in school to better the world around us. Zaid was outstanding in Quraan, languages and mathematics. Hand up if you guys are like him. Okay, so as we can already guess here, Zaid Ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu spent his whole life dedicated to knowledge. There were two things that Zaid was known for, and that was the Quraan and the laws of inheritance. You see, because Zaid was amazing at memorizing and reciting the Quraan, he became the scribe and secretary of our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A scribe is someone who writes out information for another person. Every time Allah revealed an ayah or verse of the Quraan through the angel Jibreel alayhi salam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam called Zaid ibn Thabit so that he could write it down. It was very special that Zaid could write, because not a lot of people back then could. Now, we have a bit of a problem here, you see, because back then there was no pen and paper. So how are they going to write stuff down? Well, instead they were very clever and used things like charcoal as the pen, and things like camel skin, leather, leaves of trees, and even bones of animals to write on. Can you imagine how big all these sheets of paper would have been? Very big. Paper is thin, leather and animal skin isn't. Because Zaid ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu wrote down verses of the Quraan for the Prophet, he was part of a special group called Kottab Alwahay, or the secretary of the Quraan. This was such a special title that when he went to battle on the day of Tabuk, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam let him carry the flag banner of the Muslims, because the Prophet had honored those who had the Quraan. Now, what do you think Zaid did with all the math that he was good at in school? Well, he didn't let it go for waste, because he eventually became the master at the laws of inheritance. Now, this sounds like a big word, but what they are rules that explain to us how much money is given to different people of the family when someone passes away and he leaves behind some money. So, for an example, if an old man peacefully passes away, how much money should go to his 3 daughters? Now, Zaid was a smarty and could figure out these difficult inheritance problems among the people. So they would run to Zaid ibn Thabit every time they had a problem, and he would use the teachings of the Quraan to figure out the solution. In fact, during the Battle of Yarmouk, which was one of the largest battles that took place, Zaid was sent to work out how much the prize of war should be divided between the different Sahabas that went there. There were like 30,000 Muslims that fought. Can you imagine how much dividing that would take place? He had no computer and calculator like we do nowadays for difficult math problems, but Zaid was able to figure it out. Now, we've spoken a great deal about the Sahaba. No doubt he was an outstanding person by all counts. He was very good in reading, writing, and reciting and memorizing the Quraan from a young age, as well as being good in maths and school. He is very well known for his knowledge about the Quraan and the laws of inheritance. But our journey with Zaid Ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu isn't finished here, because there's one big part of his life we haven't spoken about yet, and that's what he's most known for, bringing the Quraan together, like we said in the beginning. So, I'll see you for now, but remember to come back tomorrow to hear the remainder of Zaid's story and how he made it through his biggest challenge yet. Bye for now. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.